What's up, everybody? Welcome to a little history of Super Sentai. I wasn't planning on making another episode this soon, but I figured, this one was important. With me being such a diehard Tokusatsu Kamen Rider, um, and Super Sentai watcher, news broke on October 31st, 2025, via several websites and news outlets that Super Sentai as a franchise will be coming to an end after number one Sentai Goes User, which is the current Super Sentai series scheduled to end in 2026. Now, across the internet, some people are sad that the franchise they grew up on, caught on to later in life, is coming to an end after 50 years, while others speculate that this is just a plan to rebrand instead of getting rid of the live action concept for Super Sentai altogether, which is kind of the side that I'm leaning on. Now, without going into panic mode, right, I'm going to explain a little history of Super Sentai and why this might not be as alarming as it sounds, right? So Super Sentai isn't the original name for the franchise, just a little history. It just began as Sentai, with the first being Himitsu Sentai Go Ranger, back in April 5th, 1975, and then the next series being the final Sentai show, that being Jack Digigentai, which debuted April 9th, 1977. After that, the franchise would see its first rebranding with Battle Fever J, February 3rd, 1979, as the first Super Sentai series, and the Super being a reference to the giant robots or mechs that the team would use in order to defeat giant monsters. Now, it was also reported that the reason for this decision to end Super Sentai after 50 years is that the events and the merchandise sales aren't enough to cover the high production costs. And but I have a feeling that Super Sentai is kind of in the same boat Power Rangers was in when Power Rangers Turbo ended. And for those that don't know the history, Power Rangers Turbo was a Power Ranger series that did so bad that it pretty much killed the entire Power Rangers franchise. So the next series, which was Power Rangers in Space, was intended to be the final Power Rangers series ever. So when Power Rangers series aired, they kind of pulled out all the stops. It was the first series to feature a battleizer, which would continue on to be a part of Power Rangers since its inception. It was the first time Power Rangers publicly revealed their identities, which was one of the main taboos that Zordon spoke on even during Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. And it was the last series of the Zordon era, being that Zordon died during Power Rangers in Space. But because of everything that happened throughout Power Rangers in Space and the final two episodes of Countdown to Destruction Parts 1 and 2, the ratings were so high that Saban started canceling and pulling resources from other shows like Mystic Knights of Tir na Nog and like several other shows that I believe they had. But they started pulling resources from those shows and started canceling those shows just to put everything into making Power Rangers a success from that point forward. Now, fast forward to the ending of Cosmic Fury, Power Rangers is on, they're going through like a reboot supposedly with Disney, and they're going to begin filming supposedly in London in 2026. I don't know the ins and outs of it, so don't quote me on that. But they were talking about a rebranding even during while Dino Fury was going on. So it looks like they're finally going through with it. Supposedly they're getting original costumes, and it's an original concept, just a complete rebranding of what Power Rangers is. So we'll see what happens with that next year. But getting back to Super Sentai, number one Sentai Goes User might be in the same spot as Power Rangers in Space, meaning that if they do it right, it could save the franchise if the franchise is in trouble at all. Now, TV Asahi, which is the studio that's in charge of Super Sentai, they refuse to make any comments on any future productions, which is smart because nothing is set in stone right now. Number one Sentai is still ongoing. Um, it's no telling what the future holds. It could be the ending, or it could be um, the ending of the franchise underneath the Super Sentai brand, and they could be carrying it into the future under a new name. Only time will tell. And until TV Asahi makes an official statement, you have to take a lot of this as a grain of salt. But keep your eyes open and your ears peeled, and we'll see what happens. So, me personally, I've been a fan of Super Sentai since Die Ranger. I mean, this is like going back to like when Power Rangers first started in the United States, which is like '93. So I've seen episodes here and there, and I've watched Super Sentai off and on. But the first Super Sentai show that I watched from beginning to end was Kaizo Sentai Go Kaiger, and that got me hooked on every Super Sentai show since then. And as far as watching it, from beginning to end. So yeah, man. I mean, you don't want to hear things like this. I mean, because over time, cartoons went away. We don't really have cartoons like we used to back in the day. And Power Rangers was one of those mainstay shows that, even though Saban sold it to Disney, and Disney sold it back to Saban, and then Saban sold it to Hasbro, and they were doing everything that they could to keep Power Rangers going. Um, it still seems like it's going to be an ongoing thing. And being that Power Rangers was an adaptation of Super Sentai, nobody's seen Super Sentai ending ever. It was just like one of those mainstay franchises that just wasn't going anywhere. But when you think about it, a lot of people don't know, especially if all you did was watch Power Rangers growing up. Super Sentai had a lot of avenues that they were pulling revenue from. That they had the music CDs. They also had the stage shows that they were pulling revenue from. Those type of events. Not to mention the TV shows themselves and the movies, the crossover specials and things like that. The crossover movies. It was a lot of stuff. Of course, like the toys, the morphers, the etc. All that merchandise. They were pulling revenue from all those sources. So to hear that, they're not making enough money from these things to keep the production costs, or to keep the production going, that's kind of like a sign of the times, man. So I'm hoping that, again, it's not as bad as it seems, because it's like, that's crazy, because in the history of tokusatsu, several franchises didn't make it. Like you have the Metal Hero series, which is where we get VR Troopers from, as well as Big Bad Beetleborgs and Beetleborgs Metallics. That came to an end. I think they had like two more series after Beetleborgs, or rather, I'm trying to think of the name of the Japanese original show. I think it was called like Juko Beat Fighter and Beat Fighter Kabuto. That was like Beetleborgs and Beetleborgs Metallics. And then they had like two more, which was B-Robo Kabutak and Tetsuwan Tantei Robotak, both in 1996. So those are like the final two Metal Hero series. And then that franchise was going. And then, of course, we had like the Garo series, which didn't last. Well, I can't even tell you when the last Garo series was ongoing. So, or when the last Garo series happened. Because I started watching Garo around like Kamen Rider Ryuki around that time. So, yeah, like to see, I mean, there's no word on on if Kamen Rider is affected by this, because Kamen Rider is doing just fine. Like Kamen Rider has always been in a better spot than Super Sentai. You know, they've always been, that series has always been in a better spot than Super Sentai. So there's no word that Kamen Rider is affected by this at all, because Kamen Rider came first, mind you. Super Sentai began um, April of 1975. Kamen Rider began in 1971, April 1971. So, yeah, man. I mean, who's to say, like, if Super Sentai is ending, that effect might trickle down to Kamen Rider, depending on how well it does. But I just can't see, and maybe this is just me being a fan of it, I just can't see that after 50 years, after so many adaptations, after inspiring so many other countries to do their own tokusatsus. Of course, like the Philippines, they have like the Armor Hero series, if I'm not mistaken. Of course, we get Power Rangers from Super Sentai. And I'm just thinking, I wonder if a portion of the money that made it possible to keep Super Sentai going for so long was Saban, or whichever company that was in control of the trademark. I wonder if they were depending on the money from the company in the United States buying like the stock footage from them, because I know that was a portion of their revenue as well. And then when I believe it was Hasbro that said that they were going to stop doing Super Sentai adaptations. I think this is around the time Dino Fury, Cosmic Fury happened, or something like that. Like, I know, that's money that Japan is missing out on. So I wonder if that had anything to do with it. Because that money probably covered whatever revenue they weren't getting from merchandise or events. Like, that's like a guaranteed check. So I don't know. But like I said, we'll see what happens. I'm keeping my eyes peeled on the TV Asahi website and on their Twitter, because I'm interested in seeing what they have to say. But we won't know anything officially probably until like 2026, or closer to 2026, when the show comes to an end, whichever month the show comes to an end. So if they don't make an announcement for another Sentai show, that could be a sign right there. Or we could be seeing, again, Super Sentai being rebranded as something else. And that is what continues the live action superhero teen franchise. But only time will tell. But we will see.